Hello, welcome everyone. We're glad you're here. More people coming in. There's more seats getting set up in the back, so as you're coming in, people who are coming in over on my right, please come in, find seats. A few more, not very many more seats inside, so welcome. We're really glad you're here. It's my pleasure to welcome Ofelia Zepeda. We'll talk a little bit more about the organization and the planning and what's in store. So please help me welcome Ofelia.
Wapakenda bachi matsak start mamtia tata wisich mampi erit mamtia tata kyo kaya I tata nawat mat wapak ba bachi up mam mo sahap chui mam ya oya poitam adam hachawadaga mach achim mach adam mach sirkik mamtia tata mach aptarit mam sapino oya pot itam chui chimoy tawum tata mat sapino nyukat at ita chui. So it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the first in our series. My welcome remarks, of course, is specific to welcoming you to Autumn Land and also, of course, to the event. And in welcoming you to Autumn Land, of course, we always want to say that we, as Autumn, are happy that you are here, and also that just to comment about being mindful about the land and also to help us care for it in the best way that you can. So this reading series tonight is the first one in 4, as our poster indicates. All of the readings will be here at the Poetry Center. The reading series is the centerpiece, actually, of a graduate seminar that my colleague and I, Dr. Larry Evers, are co-teaching this semester. And it's a seminar that I've had the pleasure of teaching with Larry in the past, and we've always had a very good time. We always end up learning quite a bit, of course, not only from the writers, all the new readings, but most especially from the students who are in the seminar. This semester's seminar takes up the question of poetics and politics of water in the work of 4 contemporary American Indian writers, including tonight's writer, Sherwin Bitsui, Simon Ortiz, myself, and Natalie Diaz. In addition, the seminar also looks at the work of other writers, filmmakers, and artists, and brings all of it together, of course, primarily with the thoughts and ideas and questions by our graduate students in that particular seminar. This seminar, along with the readings, and especially with the readings, couldn't be made possible by a number of sponsors, and we're always grateful to people who are interested in this topic and are willing to come forward. So before I go any further, I need to do that, to thank all of the wonderful sponsors for the speaker series especially. Their sponsorship was in the form of space, as here in this wonderful venue, funds at all different levels, and of course labor, volunteers, and different types of staff support. These different types of support came from the English Department, the American Indian Studies Program, the University of Arizona Poetry Center, the American Indian Language Development Institute, the Institute of the Environment, the Confluent Center, the Southwest Center, and the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. So again, many thanks for their support and their interest in this important topic and this wonderful reading series. So now it's my pleasure to welcome my friend Larry Evers, who will do the introductions for tonight's guest.
The work of the poet who's with us tonight is original. It's primordial as the floodwaters it invokes, and as contemporary as the idea of a digital line. The poet himself has an uncanny ear and peripheral vision. Interviewed by Indian Country Today, a leading national news source for Native America, he remembers, I grew up in a traditional family, and I always knew that language is powerful, that it can enact things and change things and transform them. But when I saw contemporary forms of poetry, its books in books, anthologies, the metaphors and the structures of their poems resonated with me on a basic human level. So it was a natural gravitational pull to this thing we call poetry. Originally from White Cone, Arizona, within the Navajo Nation, Sherwin Bitsui is the author of 2 collections of poetry, Flood Song from Copper Canyon Press and Shapeshift in the Suntrack series from the University of Arizona Press. Sherwin holds a degree from the Institute of American Indian Arts Creative Writing Program and one from our own program here at the University of Arizona. He has won many awards. He's earned them. The 2011 Lannan Foundation Literary Fellowship, and the same year, in 2011, a Native Arts and Culture Foundation Fellowship. Other awards include the PEN Open Book Award, an American Book Award, and the prestigious Whiting Writers Award. Of his experience at IAIA, the Institute of American Indian Arts, Sherwin remembers, "When I went to the Institute, I found all these Native writers who were interested in poetry from all over the US and Canada and Alaska. There was something very, very beautiful about the moment I first walked into the classroom, and there were all tribal authors, tribal members, sitting with their pens and pencils and poems, and we all shared poetry. One thing that grew out of that time at IAIA was a rich and sustaining community. And I want to remember one anecdote that I shared with Sherwin with regard to this. It was about the time that he published his first book, and Sherwin came into my office for a visit, and he said to me, I'm interested in a reading, setting up a reading. I'm a longtime admirer of Sherwin's work, so it's a no-brainer, right? Of course, I'll be happy to work with you and set something up for you. But that wasn't it. That's not what he was interested in. He was interested in arranging a group reading, a reading for a group of 5 or 6 young Indian writers. And he explained to me the reasons why. None of these people had had the benefit of larger audiences. None at that point, I think, had published, certainly not published books. And so we worked on it. We were able to put together a reading in April of 2003, and we filled the Modern Languages Auditorium, and it was a great night celebrating the work of those younger poets, all of whom now have indeed published a book and are on their way. So it's that achievement, let me say, in community building that's not often very visible, certainly not on Sherwin's resume, but I think it stands as one of his greatest contributions from my point of view thus far. Sherwin's work, of course, speaks for itself, but I did want to quote, you could say, a colleague of his, Sherman Alexie, in order to close this introduction and leave you with Alexie's perspective on the words of this poet. Alexie says, there are junipers, black ants, axes, and cities dragging their bridges. I can hear Whitman's drums in these poems, and I can see Ginsberg's supermarkets. But above all else, there is an indigenous eccentricity, a cornfield at the bottom of a sandstone canyon that you will not find anywhere else. It's a pleasure to welcome Sherwin Bitsui.
Sherwin Bitsui being between Trodagin in the Schla. Tlazalana Bashes chain, Kiani the Shachedo, my Deshkijan Edashanella, but I didn't Schla. Lay baby get by Ogede, other Shiaho, other a Shabijado, Bashishinigi Kedata. Oya Bay Hansen, Jakwansokai. Greetings, everybody. It's so wonderful to be back home. I've lived here for 10 years, and it never feels like I leave. It just feels like I'm always here. So it's always good to be back. All three of my works, the books I'll be reading, I think their muse is the Sonoran Desert in so many ways, and they all sort of emanate from here. In some way, some shape or form. But thank you also to Larry Evers, Dr. Larry Evers, and Dr. Ophelia Zepeda. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you to your class, the Poetics and Politics seminar students. You guys are pretty amazing, and thank you for reading the work. And it's really great to have a conversation, 2-hour conversation today. And the food was good. And also just thank you to the University of Arizona. It's probably the best decision I made to come here and to find a voice and to find my path in life. And now that I'm a professor, it's a very interesting kind of circle to make, to come to learn poetry, then now to be teaching it to not only younger versions of myself, but I can see little glimpses of poetry sort of affecting them in different ways. Also, thank you to Tyler in the Poetry Center. And this reading, actually, Larry brought a poster of that moment in time, 2003. And we called it Reimagining the Imaginations. And it was Angelica Lawson, who was a PhD student, and Rennick Magazine, who helped me put this together with Larry Evers of the Department of English, and also the Poetry Center, and Arizona State Museum. And Jennifer Forrester, Santi Frazier, Orlando White, and D.G. Oakpick all have books out now. And they're making some headway. I'll just read like a little bit from Shapeshift, and then I'll move into Flood Song, and I'll finish up with some new work. And a lot of these Shapeshift poems, I'm actually walking around the campus of the University of Arizona post 9/11, and I'm composing these works. Turtle. We are speaking inside the nervous system without nerve endings to call our own. Children born chewing into incubators, not knowing walls or the beating heart of an owl hovering over the gates in her belly. Atop the white shell, dangling, cursed, quiet, waiting for the chains to be snapped in half by the beaks of awakened turtles. We turn in our beds, eyes the color of faded maps, when the story calls through the cut in the north ceiling. Outside the door, we blow songs over its warm stomach, but it doesn't soften or crumble into bread. Its palms don't bleed when hammered to the floor either. The story wants us to leap into the night without a torch or flashlight. But the fire removes its skin and clamps back its eyelids, remembering a memory wrung from the sheets of a hospital bed. While lying face down, footsteps climb to the surface of the map. The snake bit back the knife of the witness, who shook through the keyhole of a burning house after dragging the moon's sister across the floor of her amphitheater. It took him a year to forget. The skyline of a missing tooth. The ice hook untwists inside the whirlwind like a tail. A raven's rib ripped from the electric socket heats the palm, its rusted core bound by the apple's shaven hide. Like a concussion cushion between fingertips, egg batter congeals in cracks of concrete. The fourth generation of bees flee the unlocked mouth. The stoplight blinks midway between wing, beak, and worm, unwinding inside braided corn husk, pulsing near the foot of the interrogator as he slams the gate shut. The interrogator, every atom belonging to him, says, "You there, hook and worm. You there, carved pebbles tucked under the glacier. Your apathy grows like gray hair in these untied shoes." I was really interested at the time in the ticker tape, the CNN newsreel that was going across the screen. Then also, I think when I first came to the University of Arizona, I had left Santa Fe, and I remember meeting Ophelia Zepeda. I first saw her on the back cover of her book, Ocean Power, in an obscure little bookstore in Flagstaff. My dad is a carpenter, so I would sometimes ride into town with him and just get off and wander around downtown while he worked. And I remember first walking up to Ophelia. I saw her under the arbor next to the linguistics building, and it was like the first few days of school. The registration was happening, and I saw her. And I actually walked up to her, and I said, "Are you Ophelia Zepeda?" And she says, "Yes." And I said, "I'm Sherwin Bitsui. I'm a poet." Which really, I don't know why I was like, "I'm a poet." I'm probably shaking the whole time I was right there. I've grown more comfortable with that term, I think, but never comfortable. And since the theme is water, I do reference water a lot in my work. I grew up on the Navajo reservation. There's no water, so I live in San Diego now, and there's a lot of water. Just go west, there's water everywhere. And it's interesting that if you threw me into the ocean, I probably wouldn't know what to do. So search for the nearest dolphin or something to try to climb on top of. So water was always something we took care of, or we were very precious with. And I always thought in terms of the sound of water in Navajo, like my clan is bitter water. And the flood song that I wrote while I was living here really was words that were flooding, so words became water. And this is the poem that begins Flood Song, and it's just the word for water. Toi, 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 toi. Stepping through the drum's vibration, I hear gasoline trickle alongside the fenced-in panorama of the reed we climbed in from, and slide my hands into shoes of ocean water. I step onto the gravel path of swans paved across lake sand, wrap this blank page around the exclamation point slammed between us. The storm lying outside its fetal shell folds back its antelope ears and hears its heart pounding through powdery earth. Underneath the dancers flecking dust from their ankles to thunder into rain. I'm unable to pry my fingers from the axe, unable to utter a word without grandfather's accent rippling around a stone flung into his thinning mattress. Years before, he would have named this season by flattening a field where grasshoppers jumped into black smoke. A crow snaps its beak over and over again. The pass is a blurry splotch of red crosshatch with neon light on the drive south. Windows pushed down, you scoop pellets of canned air, an ocean across sand dunes, across the waning lick of moonlight, on the dashboard to crease the horizon between petals of carved snow. A red-tailed hawk scrapes the sandstone wall with its beak. A shower of sparks skate across the morning sky. You think this bottle will open a canyon wall and light a trail trampled by gloved hands as you inhale earth, wind, water through the gasoline nozzle at trail's end, a flint spear driven into the key switch. You think you can return to that place where your mother held her sleeves above the rising tides, saying, "We are here again, on the road covered with television snow. We are here again. The song has thudded." And it's a book-length poem, so I really wanted to. I probably originally conceived of this as a Rolodex poem. You could just flip it and start anywhere. Then it became something else. I strike a wet match on his wooden mine, stash my invitation behind his waterless eyes, and pencil in the first unmarked box. Dark matter in a blue scarf, crumpled map, smashed compass back there. I can feel the faces of wolves. His music fermented the cheek of a songbird inscribed on dough meat and handed the oven its first match before he collapsed on his one new idea, circled by tears underwater where a buoy strapped to a glass plow cradled the farmer's pitchfork and scythe. "Obsidian blades in here," he said. "You will count two in the silences between the gaps of our bodies. 3 in the fibrous matter of our crossing. 4 in the nurse's gown as she reaches in. 5 in the rough cage of our silence, cylindrical in the mind that wants the chameleon from the gray that crowds in. Breath, steam, who could tell the difference?" And in a stadium of afterglow, I parcel ounces of my body for each acre grazed, spear my hands with my sharpened knees, to keep some kernel of this trail my own, some piece of the idea of now before it becomes was. Chipped along the scalloped edges of flint, this captive house opens its windows as you dream green the antelope growling from the inner ring of the pictograph's central spiral. You notice, leaning inside the broom closet, a fur mop peyote stitched to the wet floor, star maps dappled with frost, lifted with the gavel when the highway begins swerving out of the rain-drenched kitchen. It is here they scoop granite stones from your chest, snap each rib shut over the highway leading south, comb your hair over pine smoke, dreaming out of the ship that carried their shackles here. Their blue squill, rectilinear in pre-dawn air, blows northward, followed by fog of galloping horses. It is here they shake down branches to lift the veil, so the water of our clans may keep from gushing out, and leave in its muddied path strips of grief swelling luminous between the chests, its plate bone, and the dimming atlases of our lungs. There is no sign of a trail leading out, only a pond of mule blood at the basin of the dam resting between us. Together, we climb the song's hair, step onto the plank, and hear birth cries erupt into a bridge of starlight, connecting the ink-soaked shores of our nameless bodies to anchors of swans coughing dune sand onto a dry riverbed. Lifting the cloth to smear the reed invisible, I notice spiders emerging from where our hair slipped out, and then leap from firelight into the raft scribbled on pond water, its translucent oars chiming metallic as it sinks below sea level. The aching inserted sideways underneath the linoleum floor begins to sound less like weeping and more like the cawing of crows gathering thirsty, fat-bellied, outside the keyhole, for whom we have become bodies for the first time, for whom our language stabs the fork with a spoon. And I carve this apple into a dove, wrap it in a nest of boiling water. I pinch your silences into soft whispers, pile them on your still chests, the marrows of turtles swirling counterclockwise inside them. I offer a dry stem, unfold this paper crane into a square cage. I keep the butcher's thumbprints here. And I compare my hands to what I imagined thought might look like when suspended in fossilized amber. Release the captured mosquito from my closed hands, string dimming gas lamps between rain and fall, and insert into the knife's pale origin a twig warming the clutching hand. Sifting atlas blue from yellow body, here again. Gaveling the nail of the first ship, here again. Creating star maps in corn husk, here again. Unfurling a blank heaven over mapped earth, here again. The time to leave, here again. To turn bone white, here again. An elk's shadow rising behind us, here again. And I hear the crackle of sawdust sliding down our throats. I notice there is no fur left for the ghosts of mammals. And the final song of Flood Song. I wanted to swallow the song's flowers, swim diagonally its arched back, its shadow stinging my hands with black pollen. We were on the same surgical table, waiting for the surgeons to carve us back into shape. The drum pulsed somewhere in the dark, and I heard a woman unbraiding her hair. I felt morning songs leap from the one smoke hole and curl outward from the roof of the sky, gliding through us like rain. I sang until the sun rose. The shadows of my face grew into a swallow with folded wings and darted into the fire. A cloud became a skull and crashed to the earth above Black Mesa. The cloud wanted to slip through the coal mines and unleash its horses. It wanted to crack open bulldozers and spray their yoke over the hills so that a new birth cry would awaken the people who had fallen asleep. It wanted to push their asymmetrical ramblings into the weft of a storm blanket, dye it hazel and sink it into the rising waters. A city dragged its bridges behind it and finally collapsed in a supermarket, asking for the first apple that was ever bitten. No one questioned the sand anymore. No one untucked themselves from their bodies and wandered the streets without knowing their plans. Everyone planted corn in their bellies and became sunlight washing down plateaus with deer running out of them. The phone was ringing through it all. The line was busy when I picked the axe and chose the first tree to chop down. Thank you for these too. I got this nice gift of rosemary. It smells really beautiful, almost citrusy. Yeah. So I began this work. I think in a way like I began this work on my before I left Tucson, 2011. The summer of, which also is the summer that the shootings happened. And I think right before that I was thinking about language, and I just feel like I was always raised to have a profound respect for language, a deep respect for language and how we talk and how we say things. And always I remember my family saying "E dojanida," you don't say those things, or "Hajogo yantke," please talk carefully about things. You know, when you address somebody, and I just remember the rhetoric of that moment. It was election season. I don't know what was happening. SB 1070 was happening here in Tucson, banning of the books at the Tucson High School, and I was also working on the Tanata Reservation, so I was crossing the border, and also really aware of the hyper sort of surveillance of the living situation of the people there, and having the border patrol constantly like swarming around the reservation. So I think I was, and then when the shootings happened, I also I guess I was lost for words because it was so close. And since then, there's only been a few more times where mass shootings have happened. And you know, the other one I can think of is when they had the high school, when they had the shootings at the kindergarten or the elementary school. But then also just yesterday, 3 Americans had lost their lives, and it's frightening what is happening, and we can only send our thoughts to the families of the 3 beautiful souls, and all the others who have been shot in the name of hate and ignorance. So this is coming out of that. And right prior to that, I visited Jefferson's class at Pima Community College, and I remember that's the sort of, I mean, there's some relationship there too in some way, but this begins it. Then I have several other moments where there's origins for different pieces of this work, but this first part is that moment. Wiretap, deer eyes, freeze-framed, and afterglow, pulse awake. I push into the coin slot, the sound of pills pebbling an emergency room floor. What lies beneath naming, I curl outward with wool scent. A new oxygen fills my reasons for stalling. Cave paintings stammering from their speech of clear water hoof this chamber quiet. Charred cradles tethered to anchors molt beside bleached saddles. Recycled blood spiders their chests in a Safeway parking lot. A spindle shadow calcifies a paralyzed moan. My thinking stills. A plate's shape is pawned for bread. Paper lungs collapse on bird claws jangling from my sleeves, ash. In the trailer's hallway, the night's unveiled ankles. Wheelbarrows spill us into corrals of blowing sand. Our footsteps breathe white shells when night heaps blue on different. When interred in plexiglass, our origin salinated. Unbelted, we plunge through our closed minds, open-palmed. Rented from a shepherd of doves, we return replenished with categories. What's left in our chests scrapes teeth on bone meal. Dimmest below our downward gaze, these stars gazing back at us. A cliff line wavers under a table's August. Crickets sniff creek burn. Shears jangle in the black and white photograph. Two. Benches face before. I replace what I saw with what I heard, pull out a letter sent from ourself to myself, and for a second the flattened field is chandeliered by desert animal constellations. A poem hands me a busy signal. Its handle broke me from my tooth. I chew its answers until I taste cracks in the chrome outline of a sky without hands. Notice every link in the trail to here is a path to back there. There is a way out. Just walk down the dirt road into cerulean dawn, light pollen cloud with fluorescent bulbs. Tap the windows of cars and trucks rattling down Highway 77 with clear fingerprints. And clasp the 9 eyes of the desert at the intersection of now and then. Ask, will this whirlwind connect to that one, make them cousins to the knife? Will lake mist etched on flakes of flood-birthed moonlight wreck its beard on a tow truck hoisting up a buck, butterflies leaking out of its nostrils, dark clouds draining off its cedar coat? Slipping into free fall, we drip pattern the somewhere parts, our shoulders dissolving in somewhere mud. The arcing sun whistles across the masked abalone brow. Its blurring pouts into a forest chirping from the lake's bite marks stamped vertically on the map's windowsill. kneeling our thoughts on ellipses evaporating from oils of fragrant wet clay. We saddle the drowning slippery rim. Father's dying ceased when he refunded this hours for fused hands plaster-coated in a glottal stop's brief paralysis. Pin-pricked holes for eyes, reversible teeth hemmed in copper thread, polished brow bones swiveling through trimmed hedges. He atrophies the aftermath, its highest frown withering on maps that dreamed our shadows waterlogged. He then moans a constellation of anchors flung at bluebirds pausing mid-flight where pewter wind creaks shut over the raft's hesitation. He explains the sun, not carried by horse, but a ceiling lamp flickering on our computer screens. So this current work is called Dissolve, and I'll read a little bit more, then we can go party. I'll go to Bay Horse Tavern. Or go to Nancy's, some other dive bar that we came across a few weeks ago. We could do a dive bar tour. So yeah, this is a real strange book for me. I feel like there's some certain concepts that keep coming back. This idea of hovering, this idea of non-space. Everything's digitizing also in this work. A bottomlit sea ponders the lake's questions. Their secret conversations thatch howls to whimpers exhaled from an isthmus of drowned wolves. Its glossary's cataclysms smoothed over the hatchet, tucked into a sheath of starlight, locates fractures potted in cisterns of smog. The stitching then unthreads to muzzled worms pulsing where an arson begins to lather heat over his neck. Backlit by a caravan of wailing fathers, he silences their smeared faces while kneeling over fire-tipped spears in an arbor of mesh and steel. Nowhere streams in blips and beeps under them. Mother threw a platter of blind spots on her son without knowing that bees slept in her feet. The beads of her breath sank into his chest. He kept them 5 long years. A tassel of singed hair cinched around his wrists, key latches soothing songbirds in his pockets of fire. He stains the night's rim with sprigs of dry air exiting fevering bodies, cut briefly by their itching. She daubs clear his brow, remembers syringes filled with lake mist, wonders if it was the sun who strung teeth marks across her wrist the night before. Together, they wander the ravine's gauge nearing empty, come upon a horse lying on the earth's heat, its legs upright in the cattle guard, butcher paper stretched taut over its wiry ribs. Its gasping sent them barreling back towards the awakened cornfield. Somewhere between, they leapt back into their bodies. They didn't recognize their own voices. And this is a piece of work that I actually went to Carlisle, where Carlisle Military Academy is, and if you've ever been there, right outside Carlisle are gravestones of the children who were sent there and who had died there. And it's just right beside the road, so you can just park, and then the grave is just right here, and then you see the headstones. You see the different tribal names like Dakota, or even Inupiaq or Apache, and all these tribal names on them. And then some of them are unnamed, some of them were babies. But what I found more shocking was The fact that even the grave was relocated to build a soccer field inside the Carlisle Military Academy. So I thought, not even in death, that'd be picked up and moved. But also, my friend DG Okpik also, I visit her in the hospital because she had cancer treatment. But there was one moment where she woke up and she said, the children, why are they killing themselves? Because she was also working with kids in the dormitory in Santa Fe Indian School, and also, was wondering why there was the sort of culture of cutting was happening. The chopping block's cobalt hum, mothing braids of summer lightning, lulls a hatchet's handle loose and then capsizes children, aiming their flint spines towards steering wheels, thawing in house fires. Suckled by shadows, suckling their feet, enrolled in a disappearing act. They hand-stitch starless skies to their temporary faces. Their dream of lightning dreams yellow soil. The vowels of the starved hang over the sequel of them. They are what raven's claws would sound like when unzipped from fallen apples. Gathered in thirds of halves, they drain spotlights on police dogs barking at their floating cages. Forearms sliced with ladders, the climb downward climbs up to greet them. Then I'll go ahead and finish up with just some new work. Oh gosh, where did I put it? So that's my fourth collection, and we'll see. I called it Dissolve, so I don't know if that's going to be the title when it's printed. But this, all my books, and so the fourth work I feel like is really a work that's coming home, and I return back to Albuquerque, and home is tenuous all the time. I don't know, can we ever go home? Anybody here? I guess I am home right now, but... And I just thought of, so how many of you guys have ever been to Albuquerque, Central Avenue, Indian Row? It's an interesting place. And so this poem is written out of that experience. It's called, there's a bar called The Caravan. The Caravan. Lean sleep, fragrant in the rear view, flex its shredded map across the ribs of our minds' infernos. The city's neon embers stripe the asphalt's blank page, where this story pens itself nightly, where ghosts weave their oily hair into his belt of ice, dress him in their pleated shadows, and lay him fetal on the icy concrete. The afterbirth of sirens glistening over him. We drain our headlights on his scraped forehead and watch the December moon two-step across his waxen eyes. His mouth's shallow pond, a reflecting pool where his sobs leak into my collar. One more, just one more, he says, as he thaws back into the shape of my brother, bruised knees thorning against his chest. We steal away, our wheels moan through sleet and ash as death places second, third, and fourth behind us. At home on the reservation, our father sifts dried cedar leaves over glowing cinders. Mother, hovering above cell phone light, awaits some kind of he's okay, he never went out, watched a movie instead. But tonight, my speech has knives. that quiver at the ellipses of neon Budweiser signs blinking through the fogged windshield, and I text, I've only rescued a sliver of him. He's only 25, and he smells like piss and blood. His trophy buckle snatched for pawn by the same ghosts who traded his jacket for a robe of snow and ice before inviting him back into the caravan for one more, just one more. Thank you so much. Sorry it's so somber for Friday night or Thursday night. Someday, maybe prose. Maybe prose will be a little bit more happier.
So we have thank you first for being here. We have time for a few questions. It's a big crowd, so bear with me while I come to you, but please just raise your hand and I'll chase you down with the microphone.
No questions.
Thank you so much for reading.
So you talked about how the Sonoran Desert was kind of your muse for the first two books, which I thought was interesting because I feel like in your writing, place is so expansive and time moves in really interesting ways. But so how has moving to California kind of impacted what you're doing?
I don't know. The poems are different. I don't know. I mean, they're. I feel like they're moving towards rather forms that we might all know. I might be more interested in that. Yeah, I don't know yet because I'm writing Dissolve, and I think there's a different kind of pacing in that, and I think there's a different kind of attention. So maybe those are the California pieces. But it began here, but then it moved to, Albuquerque. But some of the newer pieces might be, I don't know yet. Maybe those haven't come yet. I've just been busy teaching 3 classes. It's like way. So I don't know where. I feel guilty writing. Yeah. But a lot of the poems. I always go back to when I go back and when I'm sitting there and in my imagination, I go back to my home or just I start remembering like the place where my poems began, and a lot of times I used to go situate myself in the landscape outside south of my home, between my home and Holbrook, near the border. I just remember always looking at the sunset there, and it's on the Painted Desert. And so that was always a part of my imaginary in a way, like how I would, where I would sort of root myself. But lately it's moved. I don't know where it's going. It's kind of, either it's disembodied now or I don't know. The poem is sort of a phantom of something. Any questions? Oh,
First of all, I want to say thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You're a great inspiration. How was your experience writing your Series 1 and Series 2? Because you said it was connected to 9/11, right?
What's that?
I thought you said at the beginning it was connected to 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
So how was your experience writing them?
That one was, the first Shapeshift were all sort of millennial poems. So some of them some of them are early, like 90s, and then they move into the mid or early 2000. And The Skyline of a Missing Tooth actually was a really strange poem because I wrote it just like the evening, just like at 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning. I got up and I had to write a poem, and then 3 hours later I heard on the radio, because we didn't have a TV, but that 9/11 happened. So those first images of like, I think with the title, The Skyline of a Missing Tooth, it was kind of this weird thing. And I noticed inside the poem people were jumping out of buildings and stuff, or they unrolled themselves from their ties or something. Yeah, so all of those poems, and just I think more like the climate of the moment then, and especially with America, in terms of America, coming out of its adolescence in a way. America no longer somehow belonging to the world suddenly because of that moment. Because all of a sudden it's like, oh, we can be bombed too. Like we can be vulnerable too. I think that was really interesting. And then the discourse, the rhetoric at that moment, I was sort of confused because I come from a people that were warred upon also, and a people that were put into a kind of concentration camp, and people who've been put on reservations. So that narrative was interesting because it was a sense of revisiting history. Suddenly everybody was involved at that moment. But I always thought, like, at that moment, I'm like, oh, we kind of know this feeling. I can feel it in my sort of memory of, through my family. I sense that we've always talked about Huelta. We always talked about Fort Sumner. We always talked about coming back, and we always talk about the people who lost their lives as the soldiers marched them off to Fort Sumner for basically extermination. So, I know it's like all dark, isn't it? Like, let's talk about Star Wars. Right.
What are you most interested or worried about in relation to water in your work now?
The new work. Well, I feel like I experience. I feel like I write, and then all that sort of the work is a pattern of the forces that it's working against. So, in relation to water, there's a line that I was looking for in my new book where it goes through this sort of cycle, and then it ends up being a water fountain, a fountain of water, something about the slashed wrist of the Colorado water coming out of the water fountain, probably in Phoenix, we'll say. The blue, turquoise, flamingo pink waterfalls that they have up there. But I think in general, just it's heavy on my mind. I think about it all the time, and I just wonder about the weather. I wonder about climate change. I think it's just something that we have to contend with. And I'm living in California, and there's no water there, but there's also no real consciousness of the fact that there's no water. People are still watering their lawns. I mean, it's an intense drought, and they constantly are showing pictures of the reservoirs, like, I mean, barely nothing. I mean, barely even water in there. So I think in relationship to Navajo culture, where Navajo Nation is, we also know that our springs have dried up in certain parts of the reservation, and springs that have either because of drought, or either because of no rain, or because of this sort of the mining industry. So, and the water that is piped in, that my mom gets in her trailer, is really white and thick, and tastes horrible. But that's the water we have to drink. So there's no, no filters. So I all of that stuff is something that's on my mind. And then just seeing more sand dunes as I go home, because I was a shepherd, so I had to look for those green grasses up on top of the mesa where the rain had recently touched. So all of that I'm aware of. But I think the concerns with in Dissolve is like the woman remembering syringes filled with lake water, and I don't know what that means yet, but I sense it means something to that effect, that we somehow are injecting lake water as opposed to penicillin, and I just wonder about those things. Somebody else was going to say something?
Following on those last two very thoughtful reflections, how would you characterize today the vocation of the poet? I don't know.
Well, I mean, we've all been sort of absorbed into MFA programs somewhat. You know, some of us have been. We teach in academia. It provides us with certain means to create work. I guess in a way I didn't think of it as vocation when I started. I just did it, and it was just something that came out of me. I don't know why I wrote, or I don't know why I was driven to this art form or this form. So vocation is an interesting term to put right next to a poet. Is it a vocation? What is it? To me, it feels like you're summoned to do it, and that's why you do it. Otherwise, why spend hours or years on one line that you might only change one word, out of? It's that kind of attention that requires patience, I think, and it requires a kind of obsession and air and water and some good food and margaritas once in a while. I think. Yeah. So thank you so much. Okay, thank you. We can talk afterwards. Thank you.